Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Rain fell in fine drops on the city sidewalks, reflecting the streetlights in flickering puddles. Anna Williams, a brilliant but quiet young lawyer, was walking home after a long day at the firm. Her mind was occupied with the client cases she was fiercely defending, unaware that tonight would change everything. Suddenly, a patrol car stopped abruptly alongside him. A police officer, Mark Sullivan, got out, his expression arrogant and contemptuous. For no apparent reason, he called out to him in an authoritarian voice. "You, madam. I think you know how to behave, don't you?" Anna felt her heart beat a little faster, but she showed no fear. She knew he was trying to intimidate her, to push her into making a mistake so he could accuse her later. Mark smiled condescendingly, certain of his power. "It's just a routine check," he muttered, searching his things with an accusing look. But Anna had anticipated this kind of situation. Without flinching, she discreetly took out her phone and began recording the scene. Every word, every gesture of the police officer was captured. She had no idea yet that this simple precaution would be the weapon that would bring down Mark Sullivan. As he tried to humiliate her in public, implying that she might end up in prison for a trumped-up offense, Anna remained calm, polite, but firm. Her dignity and determination shone brighter than the fear Mark wanted to impose. What he didn't know was that the woman he was trying to crush had just begun the plan that would destroy his career, a plan built on every injustice he had committed and that she was about to reveal to the world. The next morning, Anna couldn't get the previous day's incident out of her mind. Every detail of Mark Sullivan's condescending look, every arrogant word uttered, still echoed in her head. But instead of letting fear overwhelm her, she focused on what she could do, transform this humiliation into strength. At the office, she began gathering her notes. She remembered every word, every gesture, and knew the recordings taken on her phone would be crucial. She discreetly contacted 2 trusted colleagues, explaining the situation. Together, they began investigating Mark's past. It quickly became clear that this wasn't an isolated incident. Several anonymous complaints had been filed against him, but none had led to any action: intimidation, threats, abuse of power. Mark thought he was untouchable. But he hadn't counted on Anna. Meanwhile, Mark, confident in himself, continued his routine at the police station, unaware that someone was silently plotting his downfall. He had no idea that the evidence Anna had accumulated would soon catch up with him, and that the woman he had tried to crush wasn't about to back down. Every night, Anna reviewed her notes, listened to the recordings, and methodically prepared her case. She knew she had to remain calm and strategic. A hasty confrontation could have ruined everything. Her patience and determination were her best weapons. Thus began the plan that would turn a night of fear into a resounding triumph, and demonstrate to Mark Sullivan and all those who abuse their power that no one is above justice. In the days that followed, Anna took a methodical approach. She knew that emotion alone wouldn't be enough to bring down Mark Sullivan, she needed irrefutable evidence. She spent hours at the office, analyzing public records and internal reports about the officer. Every incident, every ignored complaint, was carefully noted. She also contacted witnesses to the street incident. Some had witnessed the incident from afar, others had experienced Mark's arrogance firsthand. All agreed to talk, confident that someone would finally listen to their stories. Anna encouraged them to write detailed statements and provide any available evidence: photos, videos, voice recordings. Meanwhile, Mark continued his routine, convinced that no one could touch him. He laughed with his colleagues, despising the outside world. He didn't know that Anna was turning every humiliation he suffered into a legal weapon. She was creating a comprehensive, documented, and solid case capable of ending his career. Every night, Anna reviewed her notes, refined her recordings, and organized her evidence. She knew that patience was essential. One misstep could jeopardize everything. Her goal was clear: not just to defend herself, but to publicly demonstrate that abuse of power has consequences. Then came the moment when everything was ready. Every testimony, every visual and written piece of evidence, formed a solid case, ready to be used in court. Anna had transformed her initial fear into a strategic strength. Mark Sullivan thought he was intimidating a private citizen, but he had no idea that the very woman he had tried to break was about to publicly overthrow him. The trap was set. The final confrontation, the one that would change everything, was only a matter of time. The day of the trial arrived, and the atmosphere in the courtroom was electric. Anna entered, calm but determined, wearing a dark suit that reflected her seriousness and professionalism. Across the room, Mark Sullivan didn't immediately notice the woman he had tried to intimidate. When he saw her, his arrogance turned to surprise, then irritation. Anna sat down at her desk, placed her impeccably organized file in front of her, and waited for the judge to begin the hearing. The first few minutes were formalities, but every glance she exchanged with Mark escalated the tension. He tried a sarcastic remark, a condescending smile, but Anna remained calm. She knew the courtroom wasn't a place for displays of force, but for evidence. When it was her turn to speak, Anna began methodically. She presented the recordings of the confrontation, the witness testimonies, and the summary of all the previous complaints. Every word was weighed, every piece of evidence irrefutable. The judge and jury listened attentively, shocked by the extent of Mark's abuse of power. Mark, unable to respond effectively, tried to minimize his actions, but Anna had already anticipated every objection. She calmly exposed every contradiction in his statements, every documented abusive behavior. Her tone was firm but calm, and her record spoke for itself. As the trial progressed, the courtroom witnessed an unexpected transformation. The man who had believed he could intimidate an ordinary woman saw his credibility crumble before his eyes. Murmurs spread among the spectators, and even his colleagues began to doubt his morality. At the end of the hearing, the judge immediately suspended Mark, ordering a full disciplinary investigation. The fall of her career had just begun, and Anna left the courtroom with the quiet satisfaction of one who has triumphed not through force, but through determination and justice. In the following days, details of the trial circulated quickly throughout the city. The media picked up the story, highlighting Anna's tenacity and intelligence in the face of Mark Sullivan's abuse of power. The recordings, testimonies, and Anna's carefully prepared case were broadcast, exposing the police officer's arrogance and intimidation for all to see. Mark, who thought he had everything under control, found himself at the center of a media storm. His colleagues now viewed him with suspicion, and his superiors began to question his authority and methods. Every word Anna spoke in court now resonated in the press, transforming the intimidating man into a symbol of the abuse of power. On the streets, citizens who had also been victims of his excesses began to speak out, inspired by Anna's courage. Blogs, forums, and social media amplified the story, and Mark became an example of what happens when you underestimate those you believe to be weak. Anna, for her part, remained humble. She knew her victory wasn't just personal. She represented all the voices silenced by intimidation and injustice. She continued to prepare her cases and support other victims, transforming her success into a mission greater than her own story. Mark, meanwhile, had to face the reality of his actions. His superiors opened an internal investigation, his reputation was tarnished, and every attempt to justify his actions was met with the irrefutable evidence Anna had patiently gathered. The arrogant police officer everyone feared now found himself isolated, humiliated, and powerless. Thus, what began as street intimidation ended in a resounding display of justice and courage, leaving Anna as a living example of the power of determination in the face of injustice. A few weeks after the trial, the consequences of Mark Sullivan's actions were felt irreversibly. His disciplinary record was now filled with damning evidence: intimidation, abuse of power, and threats against citizens. His superiors, who had been lenient until then, could no longer turn a blind eye. The suspension became a dismissal procedure, and his colleagues began to distance themselves from him, frightened by the scale of the media storm and the fear of being associated with his behavior. Mark tried to salvage what remained of his reputation, holding meetings and sending letters of justification, but every effort was met with the irrefutable facts Anna had gathered. Every testimony, every recording, and every document presented in court added to the evidence of his abuse. Meanwhile, Anna continued her life with serenity. She continued to defend her clients, but with a newfound pride, she had proven that justice could triumph, even against those who believed they ruled by fear. Citizens who had been intimidated or threatened by Mark found in her a role model and support, and her reputation as an incorruptible and courageous lawyer grew considerably. For Mark, the fall was brutal. In a matter of days, he lost not only his job, but also the respect and trust of his colleagues and the community. He realized too late that brute force and intimidation came at a price, and that underestimating a determined individual could destroy a career built on fear. Anna, for her part, emerged from this ordeal stronger and more determined. Her victory was not just about self-righteousness, it sent a clear message to all those who think they can abuse their power. And while Mark Sullivan sank into professional oblivion, Anna forged ahead, a living symbol of courage, intelligence, and integrity. Mark Sullivan's downfall wasn't limited to his professional career. The scandals and media coverage of the affair had a profound impact on his personal life. His relationship with his family became strained, his friends and relatives began to view him differently, some openly criticizing his behavior, others distancing themselves out of shame or fear of being associated with him. Mark found himself isolated. Phone conversations were rare, visits from colleagues and friends ceased. Even his superiors, who had once supported him, now refused all contact. He realized painfully that his reputation could never be repaired, and that the trust he had believed he had earned through intimidation had vanished in an instant. For her part, Anna received messages of gratitude and support from citizens who had themselves been victims of intimidation or police violence. The press continued to highlight her as an example of courage and determination. But despite the public recognition, Anna remained humble. She knew that her fight was not just about personal victory, but about justice for all those who had been silenced by the abuse of power. The media began publishing interviews with witnesses who recounted how Anna had transformed a simple confrontation into a lesson in justice. Her reputation spread beyond her city limits. She became a reference for citizens and legal professionals, an inspiring figure who showed that patience and strategy always outweigh arrogance and brutality. Mark, meanwhile, lived each day with the weight of his mistakes. Fear and regret accompanied him, and every moment spent reflecting on his choices reminded him that his downfall had been inevitable. What had started as a simple act of bullying had destroyed his career and irreversibly changed his personal life. A few months after the trial, Mark Sullivan made one last attempt to defend himself at the final disciplinary hearing. He hoped to minimize his actions and regain some semblance of credibility. But Anna, always calm and methodical, was present in the room. Her determined gaze immediately made it clear to Mark that there would be no favorable outcome for him. When the judge questioned her, Anna took the floor to summarize one last time the entire body of documented abuse, intimidation, threats, ignored complaints, and repeated abusive behavior. Every word was precise, every piece of evidence solid, and the relentless logic of her argument left no room for justification. Mark attempted to counterattack, but every objection was quickly dismantled by Anna, who had anticipated his every argument. The room fell silent, the spectators captivated by this duel of determination and justice. The looks of Mark's colleagues betrayed their disbelief and unease. No one dared to support a man now publicly discredited. At the end of the hearing, the judge issued the final decision, a permanent suspension and the opening of proceedings for abuse of power, accompanied by an immediate dismissal from any police role. Mark, helpless and humiliated, understood that his career was over and that his attempts to regain anyone's trust were futile. Anna left the courtroom with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had fought a difficult but fair battle. Her courage and perseverance had transformed initial intimidation into a resounding victory, sending a clear message: no one can place themselves above the law. In the silence that followed, Mark left the courtroom, aware that justice had just reminded him of his place, while Anna continued on her way, a living symbol of tenacity and integrity. After the final decision, Anna and Mark's story spread throughout the city. Local and national media reported on an ordinary woman's fight against abuse of power, highlighting her determination and methodology. Anna quickly became a symbol of justice and courage, inspiring other citizens to stand up for their rights. Institutions began to review their internal procedures, aware that similar abuses could occur elsewhere. Mark Sullivan's case was used as an example in training sessions and conferences on ethics and respect for citizens. The city itself felt a change, residents felt safer, more confident that their complaints would be heard. For Anna, this recognition did not mean vanity or personal glory. She continued to work at the firm, helping other victims and using her experience to advise those who suffered intimidation or injustice. Her career reached new heights, not only for her legal expertise, but also for her unspoiled reputation as a woman of integrity and courage. Mark, meanwhile, was sinking into professional oblivion. His attempts to regain a respectable position failed one after another, and the shame of his behavior persisted in every circle where he had worked. The lesson was clear: the truth always comes out, and justice can take unexpected but inevitable forms. Anna knew she hadn't just won a personal battle. She had planted a seed of change in the city, reminding everyone that perseverance, preparation, and justice could triumph over fear and arrogance. A few months later, the city had begun to feel the full impact of the case. Citizens, inspired by Anna's courage, were more confident in denouncing abuses and asserting their rights. Local organizations invited Anna to speak about her experience, and she became a role model for anyone facing intimidation. Isolated and unable to regain a position of respect, Mark began to reflect deeply on his actions. The pride and arrogance that had guided him for years had turned to shame and regret. Although he could never undo the damage he had caused, he finally understood the importance of integrity and responsibility. His career was over, but his fall became a harsh lesson for him about the limits of unethical power. Anna, for her part, felt a deep but discreet satisfaction. She knew that justice was never an easy path, and that every victory brought new responsibilities. Her professional life continued to flourish, but she remained humble and attentive to others, ready to use her skills to protect those who had no voice. In the community, Anna's story became an inspirational tale. She demonstrated that even in the face of intimidation and arrogance, perseverance, preparation, and integrity could turn the tide. Fear never triumphed when it met justice and courage. So the case was not just the fall of one man, but the beginning of lasting change, for the city, for its residents, and especially for those, like Anna, who believed that every action could make a difference. As time passed, the media storm surrounding Mark Sullivan gradually died down. All that remained was the weight of his mistakes and the knowledge that he had lost everything he had built through arrogance and intimidation. His fall remained an example in the city of what happens when one abuses one's power. Anna, on the other hand, moved forward with confidence and serenity. Her career continued to flourish, but what mattered most to her wasn't professional recognition, it was the certainty of having done the right thing. She had transformed a humiliating situation into an exemplary triumph, proving that justice can always prevail when determination and integrity are present. Citizens who had witnessed or experienced Mark's arrogance felt a surge of confidence. Complaints were now taken seriously, and the community began to believe that everyone could stand up for themselves, regardless of position or status. Anna's story became a local legend, that of a woman who, alone in the face of injustice, was able to summon courage and strategy to restore balance. As she left a courtroom for another case, Anna smiled quietly. She knew what she had accomplished went far beyond a simple trial. She had planted the seeds of lasting change, reminding everyone that fear lasts only as long as it is allowed to reign. Justice, patience, and courage always triumph in the end. And so, from that initial confrontation on the street came a resounding victory, not only for Anna, but for all those who believe that every individual, even in the face of fear or intimidation, can make a difference.